Welcome. Get comfortable. The rain or fire sound is here, and so is tonight's story. Before we begin, where are you listening from, and is this helping you sleep? Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss our future narrations. Story 1. The night my GPS started lying. I trusted my GPS, and it led me into a nightmare. My name is Ava, and I am a travel photographer, which means I spend more time on the road than anywhere else. I was driving back from a shoot in the Red Rock Canyons. A 16-hour haul decided to power through in one go. The plan was simple. Take the interstate, then the state highway, then a smaller county road that my app promised would cut 2 hours off the trip. It was a route called Scenic Byway 17, a thin gray line on the screen winding through a vast, unbroken expanse of national forest. The first unsettling detail was that my phone's signal had vanished about 30 minutes before the turnoff. The second was that the digital map, now operating offline, showed the road as a solid, reliable line. But the actual physical road sign at the junction was so faded and bullet-ridden it was almost illegible. The third was the smell that wafted in through the vents when I rolled down the window to check a damp, sweet rot smell, like old leaves and something else, something vaguely metallic. I shook it off. I'd driven worse roads for a better shot. My old Subarus headlights carved a tunnel through the absolute blackness as I left the last vestige of cell service behind. For the first hour, it was just me, the hum of the engine, and the hypnotic rhythm of the pines flashing past. The GPS, a calm female voice named Diane, dutifully called out the miles. In 7.4 miles, continue straight. The road narrowed, the asphalt growing cracked and patched with gravel. The tree canopy thickened overhead, blotting out the stars. I turned up my indie folk playlist to fight the creeping silence. Then Diane said, in 500 feet, turn left. I slowed, peering into the gloom. My headlights revealed only a solid wall of dense undergrowth. There was no road, no break in the trees, not even a deer trail. Recalculating, Diane chirped, unfazed. A moment later, in 200 feet, turn left. Again, nothing. I drove past the spot. Make a U-turn when possible, she insisted, her tone suddenly sharp. Frustration began to prickle at my neck. I pulled over onto a weedy shoulder, the gravel crunching loudly in the stillness. I tapped the screen. The map showed my car icon perfectly aligned on the thin gray line. But according to it, I was now driving through a solid green blob, labeled Black Pine Wilderness, no public access. The road on the map was there. The road under my tires was not. A cold trickle of unease joined the frustration. I decided to trust my own eyes. I'd just keep going straight. This road had to come out somewhere. That's when the audio glitch happened. My music cut out, replaced by a burst of static so loud I jerked the wheel. From the speakers, Diane's voice returned, but distorted, stretched, and warped. To and back it groaned, the syllables dripping with static. Then the music slammed back on. My heart was hammering. A software bug, a corrupted offline map file. It had to be. I kept driving, my knuckles white on the wheel. The forest seemed to press closer. I started noticing the trees, themselves snarled, twisted things with branches that looked like skeletal fingers reaching for the road. And then I saw the first marker. A simple wooden post driven into the earth at the roadside with a symbol carved into it. A circle with a jagged line through it, like a broken O. A quarter mile later, another. Then another. They were tally marks. But a tally of what? Okay, seriously, before this gets any weirder, let me ask you guys something. Have you ever had a piece of technology just betray you? A phone that dials a wrong number over and over. A smart home device that activates on its own. A GPS that takes you somewhere completely wrong. It's a uniquely modern kind of fear, right? Let me know in the comments. The false safety came an hour later. The road began to gently descend. The pines gave way to scraggler brush, and I saw lights. Not the warm glow of a town, but the harsh, white security lamps of a small, closed-down gas station. The building was a dark, boarded-up shell, but the lights were on, buzzing and flickering, illuminating a cracked concrete pad and 2 rusted pump islands. It was the first sign of human existence in hours. Relief, warm and dizzying, washed over me. Civilization, or its corpse anyway. I pulled in just to stop moving to think. I turned off the engine. The silence was immense. I was fumbling for a paper map I thought might be in the glove box when I saw it on the GPS screen. My car icon was stationary, parked right on top of the gas station symbol. But the map around it had changed. The thin gray line of the road I'd come in on was gone. In its place, radiating out from my location like spider legs, were dozens, maybe hundreds, of thin gray lines. A chaotic, tangled web covering the entire wilderness area. And at the center of the web, where my car blinked patiently, was a new label. It simply read, Convergence. A soft, wet thump on my roof made me scream. It was followed by a slow, dragging scrape across the metal, from the center of the roof to the edge above the driver's window. Something was up there. I froze, breath held. The scrape came again, this time accompanied by a low, guttural clicking sound, like 2 stones being rubbed together deep in a throat. I couldn't move. I just stared at the headliner, imagining the shape of something heavy and wrong crouched above me. Then Diane spoke. Her voice was no longer from the dashboard speaker. It came from my phone, which was lying on the passenger seat, screen dark. It was a whisper, layered with that same wet static. Ava, it breathed. You should not have stopped. I slammed my hand on the ignition, the engine roaring to life. I threw the car into drive and stomped on the gas, peeling out of the gas station. In my rearview mirror, I saw nothing on the roof. But as the security lights receded, I saw the shapes. Tall, impossibly thin silhouettes, standing perfectly still among the pumps. They weren't there when I pulled in. Panic was a live wire in my chest. The road was a blur. The GPS screen was now a mess of swirling gray lines, impossible to follow. Diane was silent. I just drove, aiming for what I prayed was east, toward a faint, sickly greenish glow that began to tinge the horizon. Was it dawn? Didn't look like dawn. It looked like phosphorescence. The climax happened when the road ended. Not petered out, ended. At a sheer rock face, a cliff that rose into the darkness. I stood on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt inches from the stone. I was sobbing, hyperventilating. I was trapped. The web of roads on the GPS had led me to a dead end, to a wall. I got out of the car, my legs shaky. The air was cold and still, that sweet rot smell overpowering now. I looked up at the cliff, and I saw they weren't just rocks. Embedded in the stone face, fused with the mineral, were parts of vehicles. A chrome bumper here, a moss-covered tire there, the shattered glass of a headlight reflecting the eerie green glow. Higher up, I could make out the grille of an old truck, the rusted door of a sedan. It was a graveyard, a convergence point for every lost soul who'd followed the wrong road. The clicking sound returned, not from above me, but from all around, from the tree line. I turned slowly. They stood at the edge of the light, a dozen of them. They were tall, their limbs too long and jointed wrong, like walking sticks made of shadow and bark. They had no faces, just smooth, dark wood where features should be. They didn't move toward me. They just watched. And then, from the cliff face itself, from a cracked open seam in the rock that looked like a jagged mouth, a voice echoed. It was a chorus of voices, Diane's, my mother's. The voice of an old boyfriend, my own all twisted together. You are here now, it said, not with malice, but with a terrible, final certainty. You are part of the map. I stumbled back to my car, locked the doors. The GPS screen was bright, a single command flashing. Arrival. I couldn't drive. There was nowhere to go. The thin, tall things began to step forward, their movements a series of sharp, jerky angles. I closed my eyes, waiting for the scrape on the roof, the tap on the window. It never came. When I opened my eyes, hours later, the green glow was gone, replaced by real morning sun. The creatures were nowhere to be seen. The cliff face looked like just a cliff. My phone had one bar of signal. Shakily, I opened my maps. It showed me parked on the shoulder of a perfectly normal, paved county road. The route home was clearly marked. I followed it, crying the whole way. I made it home. I sold the Subaru. I don't drive at night anymore. But sometimes, when I am using a rideshare app or checking a map on my phone, I'll see a flicker. A tiny, fleeting gray line where no road should be. And from the Bluetooth speaker in my apartment, when everything is quiet, I'll hear a faint, distorted click. It's just the building settling, I tell myself. It's just old pipes, but the map is always updating. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're not alone. The scariest stories are the ones that feel like they could happen to any of us. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people find our little corner of horror. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, what's the strangest, most unexplainable wrong turn you've ever taken? Until next time, drive safe. Story 2. The wrong turn that broke reality. They say you can't get lost on a drive you've taken 100 times, but they're wrong. I learned that on a Tuesday night, coming home from my sister Lee's place, a route so familiar I could navigate it in my sleep. Or at least, I thought I could. My name is Ava, and the highway home became a place where the rules of the world simply stopped applying. It started normally enough. The soft hum of my sedan's engine, the rhythmic swish of the wipers pushing aside a light, misty rain. The GPS on my dashboard was dark-eye, didn't need it. I knew every curve of this 2-lane highway that cut through the state forest, every faded billboard for a long-closed antique store, every dip where my stomach would give a little lurch. That night, though, 3 things felt off, just enough to needle at the back of my mind. First, the usual stream of late-night truckers was absent. My headlights were the only ones painting the wet asphalt for miles. Second, the radio, tuned to my favorite static-free station, began to warble with a faint, whispering distortion underneath the music, like someone murmuring just below the threshold of hearing. And third, the smell. About 20 minutes into the drive, a sweet, cloying scent of decayed flowers seeped into the car, despite the windows being firmly shut. I shook my head, blaming fatigue. I'd stayed too late, drank 1 too many cups of Lee's bitter coffee. The smell was probably something from the dense pine forests lining the road, amplified by the damp air. The radio was just a weak signal out here. I turned it off, opting for the silence of the road, the drum of rain, and my own thoughts. That's when I saw the detour sign. A huge, reflective orange arrow pointed to a narrow side road, peeling off into the blackness of the trees. A hand-painted wooden sign beneath it read, "Highway closed 5 miles ahead. Local traffic only." I frowned. No roadwork alerts had popped up on my phone. No electronic signs warned of a closure. It seemed rustic, almost suspicious. But the alternative was to risk driving 5 miles only to be turned back. With a sigh, I signaled a pointless gesture to the empty road end, turned onto the narrow lane. The change was immediate. The pines seemed to close in, their branches scraping the sides of my car like bony fingers. The road surface deteriorated from smooth asphalt to cracked, patched tar, and then to gravel. My headlights carved a trembling tunnel through the oppressive darkness. The mist now a thick fog that swallowed the light just feet ahead of my bumper. I drove for 10 minutes, then 20, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. detour should have reconnected to the main highway by now. There were no signs, no houses, no other turnoffs. Just this endless, winding gravel path through a forest that felt too quiet, too watchful. I pulled out my phone. No service. Not even a single bar. The GPS, when I frantically opened it, showed my location as a pulsing blue dot in the middle of a blank, gray field. No roads. No map data. Just me floating in a digital void. A cold knot of panic tightened in my stomach. I was well and truly lost. Okay, Ava, think. I'll just turn around. I slowed, looking for a wide spot in the road. As I did, my headlights swept across the tree line and caught a figure. A man, standing perfectly still just within the edge of the trees. He wore a dark, heavy coat, and his face was in shadow. He didn't wave, didn't move. He just stood there, facing the road. My heart hammered against my ribs. A hunter, maybe. At night, in this weather. I hit the gas, the tires spitting gravel. In the rearview mirror, I saw his head turn slowly, tracking my car until the fog and darkness consumed him. I drove faster, the car lurching on the uneven surface. Forest began to thin, and to my overwhelming relief, I saw the warm glow of lights ahead. Not the harsh white of streetlights, but the soft, yellow glow of porch lights and windows. A small town. I'd never heard of any town out here, but in that moment, it was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. The gravel gave way to old, cobbled streets. The houses were quaint, Victorian style, but eerily uniform. Every porch light was on. Every curtain was drawn. Not a single person was on the street. I pulled over in front of a house with a sign that read visitor information. The air outside was dead still and utterly silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing. That sweet, rotten flower smell was stronger here, almost choking. I stepped onto the porch and knocked. No answer. I tried the door. It was unlocked. Hello. My voice echoed in a small, dusty foyer. A reception desk stood empty. Pamphlets for local attractions, see the Whispering Caverns. Visit historic Milford were faded and brittle, the dates over 30 years old. On the wall was a large map of the town, and that's when the first true ice water wave of dread poured down my spine. The map showed the town and the single road in and out. The road I came in on. It was labeled in ornate cursive, the only road. But drawn on the map, in what looked like fresh red ink, were other roads. Dozens of them, spiderwebbing out from the town in every direction, curling back on themselves, forming spirals and knots and impossible loops. They were labeled with names like Morning Lane, Recurrence Avenue, the Silent Parkway. Someone had recently added them. As I stared, a drop of wet, dark red liquid fell from the edge of the map frame and hit the floor with a soft tap. I stumbled back out onto the porch, my breath coming in short gasps. The town was no sanctuary. It was a trap. I had to get back to my car. I had to get out. But when I turned, my car was gone. In its place, parked neatly at the curb, was an older model sedan, the same make and color as mine, but rusted, with flat tires and a cracked windshield. It looked like it had been sitting there for decades. Hey viewers, let me pause for a second. Have you ever had that feeling? Not just being lost, but feeling like the place you're in is actively rejecting you. Like the geography itself is hostile. What's the most lost you've ever been? The sound of a door creaking open made me jump. Across the street, the front door of a pale blue house now stood ajar. A soft, yellow light spilled out. A woman's voice, thin and reedy, called out, "Ava, is that you, dear? You're late for dinner." My blood ran cold. She knew my name. I stood frozen, torn between the primal urge to run and the terrifying need to know who was in that house. Curiosity, that ancient killer, won out. I crossed the silent street and peered inside. The interior was a perfect replica of my grandmother's house from my childhood. The same floral wallpaper, the same crocheted doilies on the armchairs, the same smell of pot roast and mothballs. A woman stood with her back to me, stirring a pot on a vintage stove. She wore my grandmother's favorite apron. Grandma, the word left my lips in a whisper. She turned. She had my grandmother's gentle smile, her kind eyes. But her skin was waxy and too smooth, like a porcelain doll. And when she spoke, her voice was a chorus, layered with the whispers Id heard on the radio and the murmurs of a crowd. "We've been waiting. You took the wrong turn, but that's all right. All roads lead here eventually. You can stay. Y'all like it. Everyone does." I backed away, shaking my head. "This isn't real." "Of course it is, dear," the thing wearing my grandmother's face said, its smile not wavering. "It's as real as the road that brought you. It's a place for people who wander off the map. You're home now." I turned and ran. I sprinted down the cobblestone street, past the identical lit houses. Behind me, I heard not footsteps, but a rustling, scraping sound, like many dry leaves skittering over stone. I didn't look back. I ran until the town lights faded, and I was back on the gravel road, the dark trees a welcome shield. I ran until my lungs burned, following the road as it twisted. I had no plan, only the animal instinct to put distance between myself and that imitation of home. Just as my legs were about to give out, I saw headlights. Real, modern headlights approaching from ahead. A state trooper's cruiser rolled to a stop beside me. The window rolled down, and an officer with a weary, friendly face looked out. "Miss, you all right? Your car break down." Tears of relief blurred my vision. I sobbed out my story, the detour, the town, the thing in the house. He listened patiently, then nodded. "You're not the first. There's old mining roads all through these woods. Folks see strange things when they're tired. Get in. I'll take you to the station. We'll get you sorted." The false safety of that moment was the sweetest poison. I climbed into the warm, clean cruiser, the smell of coffee and leather a blessed normality. He drove in silence for a while, then said, "That town you described, Milford. It burned down in 1987. Tragic fire, no survivors. I stared at him, but I was just there. The houses, they were perfect. Like I said, he replied, his eyes fixed on the road. Folks see strange things. We emerged from the forest onto a smooth, modern highway. I saw the familiar green exit sign for my hometown, just 10 miles away. The panic began to recede, replaced by a shaky, exhausted calm. He had saved me. I was going home. We pulled into the well-lit parking lot of a small police substation. He killed the engine. Wait here, I'll get the paperwork started. He got out and walked towards the building. As he passed under a bright security light, I saw it clearly. The back of his uniform jacket, where his nameplate should have been, was embroidered with ornate, cursive script. It read, "The Only Road." The climax hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't rescue. It was retrieval. I was still inside it, whatever it was. The cruiser's doors were locked. I pounded on the window as the opposite thing turned at the station door and looked back at me. Its friendly face was now a placid, empty mask. It gave a slow, deliberate wave, identical to the one I imagined from the figure in the woods, and walked inside. I screamed. I yanked at the door handles, slammed my shoulder against the window. In my frenzy, my hand hit the door lock switch. It clicked. They weren't locked from the outside at all. I tumbled out of the car and ran again, not onto the highway, but into the wild, dark field behind the station. I ran through brambles that tore my clothes, through creeks that soaked my shoes, guided only by the distant, hazy glow of the real world's light pollution. I ran until I collapsed at the edge of a real interstate, where a real trucker on a real CB radio called for help for a disoriented woman in torn clothes. They found my car the next day. It was parked neatly in my own driveway, keys in the ignition, the tank full. There was a faint, sweet smell of decayed flowers that airing out couldn't erase. The GPS history showed a straight line home from my sister's house, with no detours, no stops. The official report says I had a fugue state, a psychological episode brought on by stress. My sister Lee believes me, but she looks at me differently now, with a pity that hurts more than fear. I don't drive at night anymore. I stick to brightly lit city streets. But sometimes, when I am navigating on my phone, the map will glitch for a second. And in that flicker, I'll see a network of red, curling roads superimposed over my familiar grid, and a single, pulsing blue dot drifting slowly, hopelessly, down a road labeled the only road. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill of being truly lost, share your own eerie experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Until next time, stay safe, and whatever you do, stick to the map. Story 3. The night I learned why tourists vanish. I shouldn't have opened the email. My name is Dev, and I am telling you this because I don't think I have much time left. It all started with a rental confirmation for a remote called the Whispering Pines Cabin, a place so cheap it felt like stealing. And maybe, in a way, it was. I needed the escape. My life in the city had become a blur of gray cubicle walls and the constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. A week alone in the woods to finish my novel sounded like a cliché, but it was a cliché I desperately needed. The confirmation email was oddly sparse, just an address, a lockbox code, and a single underlined line. Please respect the quiet hours after sundown. The forest is listening. The drive up was beautiful, all golden hour light slicing through dense Washington pines. But as I turned off the main highway onto a gravel service road, the GPS flickered and died. No signal. The printed directions it brought as a backup became my only guide, leading me deeper on roads that grew narrower. The tree canopy so thick it felt like driving into a green tunnel. I finally found the cabin just as the last of the daylight bled away. It was smaller than the photos suggested, hunched under the trees like a dark animal. The first unsettling detail was the smell, not the clean scent of pine, but a damp, sweet-trot odor like forgotten fruit. The second was the silence. No birds, no insects, just a profound, waiting quiet. The third was the lockbox itself, mounted not on the doorframe, but on a tree 20 feet away, as if the owner didn't want to get too close. I got my stuff inside. The cabin was clean, almost sterile, but cold in a way that the evening air didn't justify. I built a fire in the stone hearth, the crackle of logs, a welcome intrusion on the silence. As I unpacked my laptop, I realized I'd forgotten my external hard drive, the one with all my research and half-written chapters. Stupid. I had a weak, single-bar signal on my phone, just enough to painstakingly download a backup from my cloud storage. The download was crawling. To pass the time, I decided to look up the cabin's history. A quick search for Whispering Pines Cabin, and the nearest town's name brought up almost nothing. Just a few old forum posts on a hiking site. One from over a decade ago simply read, "Did anyone ever find that group from Seattle? The ones who booked the rental off-grid?" There were no replies. Hey, while I am setting this scene for you, let me ask you something. What's the one place you've stayed that just felt off? Not obviously haunted, just wrong. Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. The download finally finished around midnight. Exhausted, I shut everything down and went to bed. That's when the sounds started. Not bumps or creaks. The cabin was eerily solid. It was a whispering, a soft, sibilant rush, like many people talking quietly just below the threshold of understanding. It seemed to come from the walls, or maybe from the forest outside. I told myself it was the wind in the pines. That's what the name meant, right? I buried my head under the pillow, the damp rot smell seeming stronger in the dark. The next day was better. I wrote for hours, fueled by coffee and the picturesque view of a sun-dappled clearing. The strange night felt like a product of travel fatigue and an overactive imagination. I even went for a short walk, though I stuck close to the cabin, the absolute silence of the woods feeling more oppressive than peaceful. I found something odd, though. Behind the cabin, partially hidden by ferns, was a low, flat stone. It wasn't natural. It was too smooth, too rectangular, and etched into its surface was a symbol. A series of interlocking spirals that seemed to draw my eye inward until I felt dizzy. I hurried back inside. That night, the whispering returned, but it was clearer. Not words in any language I knew, but the cadence was undeniably conversational. A question, a pause, a reply. I got up, heart hammering, and pressed my ear to the cold log wall. The moment I made contact, it stopped. Total silence. Then, from directly on the other side of the wall, a single, sharp tap. I stumbled back into the center of the room, grabbing my phone. No signal now. None. The fire had died to embers, plunging the room into deep shadow. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, a kitchen knife in my lap, watching the black square of the window. Morning brought a false, fragile safety. The sun was out. The whispers were gone. The terror of the night felt ridiculous in the daylight. I decided I'd leave a day early. I just had to pack and go. My laptop was on the table asleep. I tapped the spacebar to wake it. The screen flashed on, but it wasn't my desktop. It was a document, a blank page, and in the center, typed letter by letter as I watched, came a message. Stay and finish your story. We are so enjoying it. My blood turned to ice. I slammed the laptop shut. That's when I noticed the other changes. My notes, scribbled on index cards, had been rearranged on the corkboard. The narrative structure I'd been struggling with was now laid out perfectly, logically, brilliantly. And at the bottom of the board, in my own handwriting, but with a frantic, jagged pressure I didn't recognize, was written, "They want to know how it ends." I packed in a blind panic, throwing things into my bag. I didn't care about folding. I just needed to be out. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. It wouldn't start. Not a click, not a groan. The battery was completely, impossibly dead. The rental had been serviced last week. I looked back at the cabin, and in the dark glass of the window, I saw not my reflection, but the faint, shimmering outlines of figures standing inside, looking out at me. There was only one thing left to do. I had to get to the main road. It was a 10-mile hike, but I had to try. I took my backpack and started walking, the gravel road my only guide. The forest was silent, watching. After an hour, I saw a break in the Teresa's smaller, overgrown path leading off to the right. A sign, weathered and moss-covered, was nailed to a tree. It said viewpoint. I don't know why I took it. Maybe I thought I could get my bearings. The path ended at a cliff overlooking a stunning valley. And there, stacked neatly against a boulder, were 3 backpacks. A purple one, a green camping pack, and a blue child's school bag. All dusty, all weathered, but clearly placed, not dropped. Behind them, on the flat rock face, the The same spiral symbol from behind the cabin was painted in what looked like faded, rust-colored paint. I ran. I ran back to the main gravel road, my breath sobbing in my chest. The sun was beginning to set, the long shadows of the pines stretching across the road like grasping fingers. And then I heard it not a whisper, but a clear chorus of voices, young and old, male and female, speaking in unison from the woods all around me. They said, "Dev, your protagonist is making a poor choice. He wouldn't run. He'd go back to the cabin. He'd want to know." I fell to my knees. The voices weren't threatening. They were editorial. They were readers. They were my audience. And they wanted a better ending. The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, into a darkness that was now complete. The road behind led to the cabin, to my laptop, to the story. The whispers began again, a gentle, persuasive murmur weaving through the trees. They were discussing my plot, arguing about my character's motivation. They were invested. I sit now in the cabin again. The fire is high. My laptop is open. The document is full of words, so many words, flowing faster than I've ever written. It's good. It's the best thing I've ever written. They help. They whisper suggestions, corrections, bursts of beautiful dialogue. I just have to finish the final chapter. They're so eager to know how it ends. I am too. I just don't know what happens to the writer after the last page is turned. The whispers are growing quieter now, respectful, letting me work. They're such devoted fans. They've been waiting for someone to tell them a story for such a very, very long time. And when this one is done, they'll be waiting for the next author to find a deal that's too good to be true. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something lurking just outside the frame, then you understand. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. It helps more people find these tales. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And most importantly, comment below, what would you have done? Would you have run into the dark or gone back to finish the story? I read all your comments. We all do. Story 4. The rules my grandmother never told me. I only went back to the old apartment building to prove I wasn't afraid of it anymore. My name is Ava, and for the first 18 years of my life, I lived with my grandmother in a sprawling Art Deco nightmare called the Alistair, a building that felt less like a home and more like a silent, watchful creature. She died 2 months ago, and the lawyer said I had to be the one to clear out her unit. The inheritance was conditional on it. I thought it would be simple. I was wrong. The Alistair loomed over the street, its white stone facade gone grimy with age, the geometric patterns around its windows looking less like decoration and more like archaic, binding sigils. The lobby was a tomb of dust and faded velvet. Mr. Henderson, the ancient super who'd been there since my childhood, didn't even look up from his racing forms as I passed. Unit 6B, he grunted, a phrase that felt like a warning. The elevator was out, of course. It always was. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete lemon-scented cleaner, and something else, something sweet and rotten that seemed to emanate from the very walls. That was the first detail I'd forgotten, that smell. The second was the sound. The Alastair was never truly silent. It had a heartbeat, the distant groan of pipes, the skittering of something in the walls, the faint, rhythmic tap-tap-tapping that could have been a loose shutter or something else entirely. The third was the light. The windows in the hallways were narrow and high, casting long, distorted shadows that didn't quite match the furniture. I used to tell myself it was just the angle of the sun. Now, at 4 p.m. on an overcast day, there was no sun to blame. Grandma's door, 6B, was slightly ajar. The lawyer had given me the key, but it seemed someone had been here first. I pushed it open. The apartment was a time capsule, exactly as I remembered it from my teenage years, yet profoundly alien. The heavy floral drapes were drawn, plunging the sitting room into a deep amber gloom. The air was thick with the scent of her rosewater perfume and mothballs, overlaying that same sweet-rotten undercurrent from the hall. Everything was meticulously clean, obsessively ordered. But there were new additions. Small bowls of salt were placed in every corner of the room. A line of black thread was tacked along the base of the main hallway, and on the wall by the entrance, written in her elegant, spidery script on a yellowed index card, was a list. Rule 1. Do not answer the door after the hall lights dim. Rule 2. If you hear humming from the walls, put on the radio. Static only. Rule 3. Never look into the mirror in the hall after dark. Rule 4. The elevator is not for you. Rule 5. Feed the guest in the spare room. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. The first 4 rules, they were familiar. Distant, half-remembered childhood admonishments shed hiss at me when I'd come home late. Ava, the lights are dim. Hurry up. Can't you hear that humming? Turn on the radio, child. I'd thought they were just her quirks, the paranoid ramblings of an old woman living alone. But written down like this, in this dead space, they felt like commandments. And the 5th rule, I had no memory of that. There was no spare room. This was a 2-bedroom apartment, hers and mine. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the creeping dread. This was grief, I reasoned. This was the strangeness of confronting a loved one's belongings. I decided to start with the kitchen, something normal. As I sorted through decades-old tins of tea, the hallway light behind me flickered. Not a power surgia deliberate, slow dimming, as if controlled by a ghostly hand. It grew so dark I could barely see my own hands. My breath hitched. Rule 1. Do not answer the door after the hall lights dim. A soft, hesitant knock echoed from the front door. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. The knocking came again, a little louder. It wasn't the firm rap of a delivery person or Mr. Henderson. It was inquisitive, patient. I stayed rooted to the kitchen linoleum, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. After a minute, it stopped. The hall lights slowly brightened back to their dull, normal glow. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Coincidence? Old wiring? A neighbor? It had to be. All right, before we go further into this, let me ask you guys something, because I think about it a lot now. What's the one rule from your childhood that seemed totally insane then, but looking back, maybe there was a reason for it? A weird superstition your family had, something you weren't allowed to do in a certain place. Let me know in the comments. Shaken, I moved to the living room to box up her books. That's when I heard it. A low, tuneless humming. It wasn't coming from outside or another apartment. It was muffled, diffuse, seeming to vibrate within the plaster itself, as if the building were singing to me. A deep, atonal drone that set my teeth on edge. Rule 2. I looked frantically around the room. Her old wood-paneled radio was on the sideboard. I scrambled over and switched it on, twisting the dial away from the faint strains of a big band station, until I found a blast of pure, chaotic static. The noise filled the room, harsh and deafening. And beneath it, the humming stopped. Just like that. I stood there, clutching the sideboard, the static screaming into the silent apartment. This wasn't coincidence. This was procedure. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of subdued terror. I worked quickly, mechanically, jumping at every creak of the floorboards. As dusk began to stain the sky outside the thick drapes, I knew I had to face the hallway mirror to get to the second bedroomy old room. It was a large, ornate gilded thing that had always freaked me out. Rule 3 glared in my mind. Never look into the mirror in the hall after dark. It wasn't fully dark yet. I could make it. I hurried down the hall, my eyes fixed on the door to my old room at the end. But my peripheral vision caught movement in the mirror. A reflection that wasn't mine. Not a monster, not a ghost. It was me, but wrong. A version of me that was still a child, around 10 years old, standing in the hallway behind my current self. She was looking at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. I whipped around. The hallway was empty. I looked back at the mirror. Only my own pale, adult face stared back, wide-eyed with horror. The child was gone. A cold sweat broke out over my body. I fled into my old bedroom and slammed the door, leaning against it, gasping. This room was safer. It felt more like me, less like her. The twin bed, the faded band posters. I decided to pack this room and get out. I'd hire professionals for the rest. I just needed to be gone. As I pulled a box of old books from the closet, my hand brushed against the back wall. It wasn't solid. There was a give, a texture like wallpaper over plywood. I pushed. With a soft groan, a hidden door, perfectly flush with the wall, swung inward. A wave of frigid, dank air washed over me. Behind my childhood closet was a third room, a tiny, windowless space, no more than a large cupboard. This was the spare room. In the center of the floor was a small, chipped ceramic bowl, empty. And on the wall opposite, written in the same spidery script, but with a frantic, shaky hand, was Rule 5, repeated over and over. Feed the guest, feed the guest, feed the guest. And below it, a final note. It prefers salt. And silence. My blood turned to ice. The bowls of salt in the corners. The guest wasn't a person. It was the thing that knocked. The thing that hummed. The thing my grandmother had spent decades appeasing, containing, with rituals and rules. And I had just broken the first two. I had ignored its knock. I had drowned out its song with static. I had not fed it. The overhead light in my old room flickered and died. The hall light under the door dimmed to a faint, dying ember glow. From the walls of the apartment, a new sound began. Not a hum, a scratching. Slow, deliberate, like long fingernails being dragged down the inside of the plaster, coming from every direction at once. Then a whisper, not in my ear, but in my mind, a dry rustle of thought. You forgot the rules. I backed away from the hidden room, into the darkness of my bedroom. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. I could see the wallpaper in the hall bulging slightly, as if something was pressing against it from within, feeling its way. The thing was in the walls. It had always been in the walls. The Alastair wasn't haunted. It was inhabited. My grandmother's words came back to me. Feed the guest. The salt. It was an offering. A pacifier. I stumbled into the pitch-black living room, my hands flailing for the bowls. I found one by the sofa, scooped a handful of the coarse salt, and ran back to the threshold of the hidden room. I threw the salt into the dark space, into the empty bowl. The scratching stopped for a single, blessed second. Then it returned, louder, angrier. A sharp crack split the air as a long, hairline fracture snaked up the hall mirror. It wasn't enough. My offering was too late, too little. It was a ritual, and Id performed it wrong. The hallway floorboard in front of the spare room door began to bend upwards, splintering with a sickening groan. A shape was pushing its way up from below, not through the door, but through the very structure of the building. I saw long, gray fingers, too many joints, clawing at the shattered wood. I saw a sliver of a face, devoid of features save for a dark, open maw from which that mental whisper poured forth. Mine. This place is mine. She understood. You do not. That's when I remembered Rule 4. The elevator is not for you. It was never a warning to take the stairs. It was a warning that the elevator was its domain. But it was also the only way out. The stairs would take me past the spare room, past the mirror, past the front door it had knocked on. The elevator was a straight shot down. I ran. I didn't look at the mirror. I didn't look at the thing emerging from the floor. I sprinted down the hall, through the living room, and out the apartment door. The hallway was pitch black, the lights completely dead. I felt my way along the wall toward the elevator call button. I slammed my palm against it. To my utter shock, a dull light glowed above the ancient brass doors. A low, mechanical groan echoed in the shaft. It was working. The doors slid open with a painful screech. The elevator car was a small, bronze cage, lit by a single, flickering bulb. It was the oldest part of the building. I leapt inside and hammered the L for lobby. The doors began to close, agonizingly slow. From down the dark hall, I heard a wet, dragging sound. The flickering bulb cast just enough light to see the end of the corridor. The thing from the spare room was there. It wasn't humanoid anymore. It was a shifting mass of shadows and distorted geometry, like the building's own blueprints made flesh, pouring itself toward me. It moved with a nauseating, liquid speed. The doors shut just as the darkness reached them. The elevator jolted and began its descent. I sobbed with relief, slumping against the cage. I was safe. I was getting out. I would never come back. The floor numbers, little rotating brass wheels, ticked past. 543. The elevator shuddered to a halt between 2 and 3. The light went out. In the perfect, suffocating blackness of the sealed box, I heard it. Not in the walls, in here, with me. A dry, salty breath brushed the nape of my neck. The whisper filled the tiny space, no longer in my mind, but vibrating in the air itself. The elevator, it sighed with a terrible, possessive satisfaction, is not for you. The doors have never opened. The lawyers say the building is condemned. The power is off. But sometimes, at night, my phone, which died hours ago in that dark cage, will suddenly flicker on for a second, and I'll get a notification for a security camera I don't own. The feed shows the lobby of the Alistair. The elevator light is on, and the brass dial above the door is slowly ticking down towards the ground floor. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you know what to give this video a like. It really helps the channel. And subscribe for more true horror stories, because I have a feeling this isn't the last y'all hear from me, or from the Alistair. Stay curious, but stay safe. And maybe listen to your grandmother's rules. Thank you for listening. If you're still awake, please leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. Sharing this with your friends helps others find this quiet place too. Good night. The rain will stay with you.